I'm joined by Isaac Ward, who has an amazing track in innovation education, as well as a background in neuroscience from the University of Lethbridge. Not only did you co-found a company called Synbiologica, but you went on to do an education degree, and you have been teaching at Siksika Nation High School, high school sciences for the last 4 years. And you're also a board member of Indigenous STEAM. And I won't say how old you are, but trust me, for anyone who's tuning in, Isaac, he's a very young person. You've accomplished so much in such a short time. I'm so looking forward to unpacking and gathering some of your insights that you've collected along the way. So welcome, Isaac.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So why don't we start with when you were an undergraduate student in neuroscience and you joined the iGEM team, I guess, and worked in a program that MindFuel operated for years called Geek Starter, although when you started, it was managed by Alberta Innovates Tech Futures. So through the eyes of a young university student, what incented you?
Oh, man, that takes me back to such a wonderful place. I remember the summer before I got to the University of Lethbridge, I had been reading through a tech magazine and I read about the iGEM program and thought, wow, what a cool program. How exciting. It's a shame that that program will never be at the university that I'm at. It seems too high level. And only to show up and walking down the halls of the University of Lethbridge and seeing their iGEM bulletin board and being ecstatic that such a program was there. And little to my knowledge, that it was such a well-founded and successful program there. I remember our first year being there, and there's this picture that I have that just brings me such joy, where we are in Boston competing against other teams from around the world, and it's the 5 finalist teams in the entire world. And on this picture is University College London, UCLA, MIT, and Lethbridge. And I'm just like, oh, wow, look at us. We are that caliber and that level of scientists and young innovators. Little old Lethbridge is making the map. And that was the beginning of it, right? That was like the first year that I was part of it, and the joy that profounded from that and like followed from that, which was just beautiful.
That's amazing. Now, for people who are tuning in, what is iGEM? Set the stage, because I don't think a lot of people know. Yeah.
Well, iGEM stands for International Genetically Engineered Machines Competition. It's a bit of a mouthful, and so they shorten it down to iGEM. It was a program that was started by a number of universities that were competing against each other and just saying, I bet you I can program biology, and I bet you I can do it better than you can. And that's what they did, is they were competing against each other and just like programming little genetic pieces of data and trying to get them to do things. It grew and grew and grew. And the last I read, I think it was 300 and some teams, universities from around the world that were competing in this competition, and has just seen growth every year. I really put a lot of the value of my university education into that program, because it was the opportunity to be able to get into the lab and do the hands-on and get dirty and make mistakes and break things and then fix them and figure out like how stuff worked, so that you could take that knowledge. I remember going back to my labs and being like, oh, I know how this works already, and I know how to apply this knowledge. And it was fun at the end of the day. It was really, really fun, and had just like a great time doing it.
At what point did you and your team say, hey, I'm going to enroll in this Geek Starter program, which goes by Tech Futures Challenge now, but and then what did that program help you and your colleagues with in terms of iterating and moving forward?
The Geek Starter program, the Tech Futures program, were really integral to our success. We were Lethbridge, we were a small team in a small university, but what that program provided us to, that was some of the biggest help, were mentor access, to be able to go and talk to these mentors and talk to subject matter experts and be able to talk about what were we trying to build and how is it going to come together and what things should we be thinking about, and being able to phone them up and run stuff by them and say, hey, I think we're going to try this, and will this work, do you think? And just get that feedback for something more to think about. You know, there were enormous funding opportunities at that point as well that really helped provide the stability and the capital to make these projects happen. There's great innovation in young minds that are eager to show and prove things. And one of the biggest challenges is getting those things onto a bench, right? Mm-hmm. Getting them somewhere that they can go play with them and spend that money to make this happen, you know. And so there were those aspects. And it was interesting because there was a commonality of like knowing who these people were, who these supporters of us were down the road with Geekstart and with Tech Futures and with MindFuel, that when the next year came up, we knew who we were talking to, right? We knew who was in charge of the program and how it was operating. And so we knew what questions to ask and what to ask for. And they were always so supportive of being like, yes, we can find that person, or we can get that training for you. Right. So I remember there was one that was training on entrepreneurship and how to pitch a project, which has followed me for years, pitching projects and like those skills and how many different places those skills are useful.
Right. I agree. It actually is still one of the number one aspects of the program is understanding how to hone the message, articulate the value proposition, what real world problem, how are you defining your solution. And so it's heartwarming to hear you reflect on that. And then so you had all of this amazing experience, and you really understanding the world of collaboration and deep thinking and deep learning and experiential or project-based learning. At what point did you get into I'm going to start a company? And you co-founded a company, Synbiologica. How old were you?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have been about 26. I believe, when that happened. It was really an interesting. I was working in another lab at the time. I was working in a neuroscience lab, and we were studying pregnancy. And it's surprising when you look at pregnancy research how little we know about the endocrine system surrounding pregnancy and parturition and things like that, and how dynamic the hormone cycles are. And so I wanted to know a specific answer, and there was no measurement device to be able to do it because some of those hormone fluctuations happen so rapidly that I was like, yes, well, I wonder if I can build something. I've got this background in bioengineering. These are biological molecules. Yeah, let's see if we can build something. And I went to my professor and said, can I build this? And they said, yes, but you need to go build a company at the same time around it. And so I gathered a couple of my other iGEM friends and said, hey, do you want to help with this? This is the idea. Here's how I think it'll work. We all got on board and off we went. Awesome. And it was interesting because it felt like we were jumping off the deep end. We were a group of scientists with no business background, and we went into business competitions, and we sat down and we're like, okay, so how do we science this? And just started reading and like figuring out what a business plan was and how it worked and how you took your idea. And you're like, yeah, this is a great science idea, and turned it into a value proposition and a stream that you could pitch towards investors. And that was a lot of fun. And then going into business plan competitions and winning business plan competitions and having other scientists evaluate what we were doing and having business people evaluate what we're doing and say, yep, this has market, this has value, this has potential. It was really cool and really exciting. And yeah, that was a good year. That was 2013. It was a great year.
Very good year. And so what is the status of Synbiologica now?
Well, we were a bunch of undergrads at the time, and with all of our ambition. It was interesting because a couple of my teammates decided they wanted to go pursue grad studies and PhDs and medical degrees. And we're like, yeah, that's important. We should do that. I think that'll only add value to our company if we finish those. So let's go do that. And we put everything in the freezer. And we put a couple things in some boxes and said, we'll come back to this in a few years. And so it's just waiting for us right now.
Good. Well, I actually love that outcome because innovation rarely happens in 12 months or 24 months, right? 10 years, really? That's a reasonable life cycle. So I love that you guys have the mindset that you'll come back to this. Life zigs and zags, and you all are doing your zigging and zagging, and we'll get to that because I know you'll be returning, hopefully, in the very near future to graduate studies. And so from Synbiologica, you went on to do an education degree.
It's funny because as we were doing Synbiologica, I was also helping one of my good friends start the first Canadian high school iGEM teams. So we had been running these at university student level, and we're like, hey, I think we could teach high school students to do this. There was a team in the States of high school students doing it, and we're like, yeah, we can do that. Me and another neuroscientist sat down and said, how in the world do we teach 4 years of university biochemistry to a group of grade 9 to grade 12 students? And we took a nice scientific approach at it again, and said, okay, this is how the brain learns. This is how the brain is exposed to information most effectively. Let's try that. And it was that dramatic success that led to those students winning a world championship, but also coming to me later and saying, I learned more in this program than I do in all of my high school learning. Why isn't high school like this? And it was that inspiration. It took a little bit to percolate, but it was that inspiration. It's that I come back to all the time that inspires me in my teaching as to why don't we teach like that, right? If the goal is learning, why aren't we in the lab playing? Because that's how we taught. And that's how we had so much success teaching these students all this university biochemistry and getting them to a point where they're creating their own projects and designing it and assembling DNA and running assays and isolating proteins. And yeah, university, but more on the grad study side of things.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so it's great to see that. And so that led to me being like, I think there's a better way to teach. And I need a teaching degree to go prove this.
Yeah. And so you did your where did you do your education degree?
I got it out of the University of Alberta.
Okay.
So I went and took 18 straight months of education degree. We're ran right through both summer semesters and got my full ed degree, and then came out of that and landed my dream job.
Which
is working in Siksika as a high school science teacher. Teaching STEM and being able to deliver it in a project-based learning manner. And I'm sitting in my classroom and just sort of looking around at this and being like, wow, this is amazing. I've got projects here where students are building mushroom chambers and bioreactors, and they have 3D printers where they're printing off model jet engines right now, fish tanks full of algae, other fish tanks full of fish. The projects we've gotten to undertake here and the success that we've had out of it is amazing. And I get these students that come back to me and say, why don't other schools teach like this? Because my students have been to other schools. Why don't other teachers teach like this? Or my favorite one that, maybe I shouldn't be saying, but is still there is, I only come to school to go to your class. Then I go. And you're as a teacher, you're like, oh, that's really sweet. But also you're like, you should stay for your other classes. Those are important too.
Yeah, they all are. And of course, with the 2020 hindsight that we all have, right? You realize these things when you're an adult, not necessarily when you're still in that kind of under 20 age. So this is really interesting. You've walked through some of the projects, and this is innovation, right? And this is so, and this is how we work together now, because of course I know many of your student teams over the years have enrolled in our Tech Futures Challenge program, and we're iterating and building those mentor connections and helping you prepare for the prototypes and the pitch competitions. And we talk a lot about the tangible or the technical skills that are developed, right? The ability to generate a design or scope out a project, identify or articulate a real world problem. But we frequently overlook, what are called the soft skills. And I personally would like these skills to not be called soft skills, because there's nothing soft about them. Collaboration, communication, building confidence, helping students understand at a young age that the great things happen in the world when teams work together. Right? There's nothing soft. These are very important things for students to learn. What have you observed aha moments with your students?
Yeah. Oh, I love aha moments. So I'm a neuroscientist, right? And aha moments are one of my favorite things, because when you look at an aha moment in a brain scan, in an fMRI, the whole brain just lights up. And it lights up in a really interesting pattern, which is, fun to look at. But when you take that pattern and you compare that pattern to what the brain looks like when it lights up with a hit of cocaine, they're very similar. They have great overlaps. They're very similar places, which tells you that if learning is done right, it can be a very addictive process that people want to come back to.
Right.
And when you think about that from a teaching perspective, how many of your students want to come back to class every day? And are you creating an environment where they want to come back to class every day? So my mantra in class is, if we're not having fun, you're not learning anything.
That's so true. So what is happening in the students? The whole cascade of positive things that's causing that aha moment. What are those things?
As you're learning things, right? Your brain is going through the connections that it already knows, right? We call this a bit of neural priming, right? Okay, I know this and I know that, I know this. And so it's getting the brain ready for that aha moment. You're getting more activity into those known areas. And when your brain finally clicks and you feel that aha moment, it is a new neuron connecting with something else.
Wow.
And you want that big hit, that cocaine hit, right? You want that big hit of stimulation to help solidify and complete that connection, that piece of understanding, right? And it's adding all that. And so we, as teachers, we talk about scaffolding our education, right? And you creating little things that help the student get to that point. And that scaffolding is actually happening in the brain, right? Physically happening. You're promoting more knowledge and this understanding of how something happens, and another way of seeing it, and the different perspectives. And the more of that you can get going, and the more excitement that you have happening, and the happier the student is, just the more general energy, and the easier it is to make that connection. And
That's
then your
amazing.
student's more likely to come back.
That is amazing. Thank you. That was amazing. Really, really insightful. And so you've created a lot of aha moments. I think so, because I know some of the projects, you've set the stage for students to participate. They create their own aha moments, but you are very much facilitating them, guiding them, giving them the tools, the prosperity tools that they need so that they love learning and they love creating, and they actually then develop a passion for it, right? And that's perhaps what we call the addiction to learning. Now, sorry, go ahead.
I think that's it, though, that I work in a First Nations school, right, where my students' lives are hard outside of school. They deal with a lot of things. And so to have an environment where it's fun and it's exciting to be is so important for them. And to show them that learning is fun. It's not something you have to do or you're forced to do. It's something that you get to do. And that when you get those aha moments in class, the want to come back and the desire to learn more and that leads into this desire to pursue higher education. And I've recently had a student come back to me and say, I had no interest in science before this, but now I want to go do bioengineering. And to go from I had no interest to bioengineering is a big step. And it's those aha moments. It's that excitement in the classroom, that passion for learning that lets them know that the limits that they feel on themselves are not actually there. They are able to push beyond those and go and pursue the things that they find so interesting.
I loved hearing this, and I loved that I could see you were getting very excited, very passionate, and I see why. I absolutely see why. I pictured myself as a student in your classroom. I would, I had a tremendous science experience when I was in my high school years, and it was because of my teacher. You're absolutely right, Mr. Paul Webster really made learning amazing, and I think he was way before his time. Now, you're a board member of IndigiSTEAM. What is IndigiSTEAM?
IndigiSTEAM is an organization currently based in Western Canada that is there to promote the access to STEM for Indigenous youth. And so we do a number of different programs, from running summer camps to getting culturally relevant STEM education into schools, to bringing in speakers and talks, robotics programs. Got a whole bunch of things that we're pursuing and doing. But really the main idea is that STEM is underrepresented in Indigenous communities. And the way out of that for Indigenous people, such as myself, is that we need access to it, right? And if there aren't people to help bring that to Indigenous communities and bring that to Indigenous youth, then we're never going to get to a point where that traditional knowledge and the traditional science that we've had for thousands of years that allowed us to exist in North America prior to colonization is not going to be able to hit mainstream. And a lot of that knowledge is just so powerful and so impactful and meaningful that it will help forward the scientific community today. There are things the scientific community today is pursuing and trying to understand that is already seen and understood. And to have young Indigenous scientists on their way to bring that knowledge and be able to deliver it in a way that meshes with Western science is really important. And to have that representation at the table is really important. And so IndigiSTEAM's goals are to get more Indigenous scientists, to create opportunities for more youth to pursue science and be able to represent Indigenous people in the scientific world.
That's a wonderful overview. And I know you and I have talked before about the importance of, when we talk about Indigenous STEM programming, this does not mean bring the Western worldview into Indigenous classrooms. It means creating a space and place where Indigenous worldview and Indigenous STEM actually develops and thrives and is part of the learning journey of many Indigenous students in Western Canada. I mean, this is the focus of IndigiSTEAM. One of the things I find myself wondering about, and this is just a perspective of my own personal question, is why are we not learning? Why are Western schools not learning Indigenous languages? We learn English, we learn French, and why are we not learning, even in Alberta, Cree, for instance, right? Or others. I mean, there's many languages across the country, because culture and language are so interwoven and so interconnected. And so this is just a wondering I've had for years. I mean, I personally would love to understand the language, but I think it's also a window into understanding culture.
I think you're onto something there. I think that there are great ways that when we want to incorporate more Indigenous knowledge into the classroom, pursuing language and giving opportunities for language to breathe really does help create an understanding of how the knowledge works. A lot of the Blackfoot ways of knowing are sort of integrated and embedded in the language. And so the way that the words come together help describe how things are. The word for springtime translates to when the geese return, right? Which is just like this beautiful concept of the observation of what is happening during that time, and giving a stamp to the dynamics of the world that are occurring around us. Oh, it's springtime, the geese are returning, right? And if we have opportunity to integrate that into non-Indigenous schools, non-First Nation schools, it will not only create an opportunity for the Indigenous youth that are there to have voice and place and belonging, but it will also help our non-Indigenous youth to see that there is place, there is belonging, there is purpose to these languages, and help reduce those barriers of misunderstanding and stereotypes and stigmas that seem to cultivate through society. So yeah, bring on the language.
I so agree with that. And I love that when the geese are returning, because I know we've also talked about how Western science likes to categorize and organize and create sort of these nice little boxes. And we say that March starts officially on March, or that spring starts officially on March, whatever it is, 21st. Okay? Every year. March 20th or 21st, whenever it is. But now I'm wondering, well, do the geese actually return on that date, right?
Right.
So I love that. You created such a nice visual in my mind. And I know we've had so much to talk about, and we've gone way over what we thought would be the time. So I would like to ask you, what next? What's your next step?
My next steps. I find that those sort of just present themselves in interesting ways. Right now, I'm applying for graduate studies in educational technology at the University of Victoria. Really hoping to get in. We'll find out in a couple of weeks, I hope. And then, the continuing to pull the rhetoric of learning should be fun and creating opportunities that allow that to happen.
You have so much to bring to your graduate studies, to the community of peers who you will be working with. I have no doubt whatsoever that you will be accepted into the program. And I'm so thankful for all that you've shared. And I know we're going to continue talking and keeping in touch. So I will not say goodbye. I will say until next time.
Thank you.